Good morning and welcome back. I am delighted to introduce our final morning keynote address. Mr. Terence Courtney from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Mr. Courtney was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Courtney has been an advocate for equity for more than 20 years. Terence led union campaigns in the public and private sectors and later was appointed to be the union's statewide representative in Georgia. Creating communities and coalitions with US-born and foreign immigrants of African descent in the South, Terence facilitated a process whereby everyday working people were able to educate themselves and address pivotal issues concerning the intersection between immigrant rights and mass incarceration from a Black perspective. This experience refined his strategy for economic justice even further. His new theory of change came to not only include workplace-based and community-based fights, but also struggles to democratize the economy itself through cooperative development. Another project became Cooperative Atlanta, a committee of diverse Atlantans assembled to study the cooperative development movement and strategize on how cooperatives may better serve grassroots communities. From this collective research, study, and dialogue, Terence and the team began to grasp the real potential that cooperatives had to offer. This work brought Terence and his colleagues into closer contact with the rich history and practical experiences of organizations like the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. The outstanding and socially transformative role that the Federation of Southern Cooperatives has played in struggling for cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy inspired Terence to continue his commitment to advancing economic justice by joining the ranks of the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Currently, Terence serves as the Director of Cooperative Development and Strategic Initiatives, where he supports the cooperative economic development of newly emerging cooperatives, while organizing with members to strengthen existing cooperatives. He is fortunate to work with staff from across the United States South to accomplish the goals and objectives of Federation members and the cooperative movement at large. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Terence Courtney.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Ariella, for that warm welcome and description of my biography. I appreciate that. I don't think I've heard it read so well. I have to say that it's a great pleasure and honor to be with you this morning. What I've heard from the previous speakers really makes me feel at home. It's moving both from an ideological and historical point of view, but also at a very personal level. Not the least of which is because recently, in the last few weeks, I've discovered some family history in Ohio, and I'm doing work to kind of investigate that. So all of this makes me doubly curious about what the reasons were and motivations for parts of my family moving to Ohio so many years ago. So I really appreciate that, and I'm grateful for everything that's been said, especially as a history nerd myself. And before I go any further, I want to assure everybody on this Zoom that I realize that I'm pretty much all that stands between you and lunch. So I'm going to do my duty and be brief. But as long as I'm here, I want to try to get our collective thought processes going. I've titled my remarks today, Building Economic Power Through Cooperative Development. It's named that because I think what we're doing this morning and thus far ties into this concept, which is your theme, going beyond 40 acres and a mule. I mean, on one level, conversations on cooperative farming can be very simple and pragmatic, right? Some might say, isn't this just about helping farmers figure out how to grow food and market commodities better? Well, I'm here to say that the cooperative economic development program that we espouse, and especially in this context of Black communities, is about that and much more. As it was said earlier, my name is Terence Courtney, and I'm the Director of Cooperative Development and Strategic Initiatives for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. My work takes place really on 3 levels. At the grassroots level, I work with communities and groups and just people in general who might be in states where we may not have dedicated staff or a state association. And I work with them to develop a plan for their cooperative development ideas. At the regional level, I work with our state associations and our state directors to craft comprehensive, universal, and really kind of uniform processes for cooperative development to strengthen us as a regional organization. And at the international level, I lead our efforts to build bilateral partnerships. For example, we're working with cooperatives in Haiti to develop, hopefully at some point when the pandemic subsides, to build bilateral trade agreements between our cooperatives and theirs. And just recently, we've been asked to come to support education in the Virgin Islands. We can't go there anymore, but folks there have reached out to us for cooperative education. So the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund is a 53-year-old regional cooperative institution based in Epes, Alabama, with offices throughout the South. My particular office is located, as Mr. Cosby noted, in Atlanta, Georgia. The Federation emerged out of struggle. During the late 60s, the winds of desegregation, much less economic justice, had not fully reached key parts of the South, especially in rural areas. Civil rights workers from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee went into these areas and were themselves transformed by the people they encountered. They met a people who were, yes, oppressed by Jim Crow and economic exploitation, but these same people demonstrated a capacity to not only withstand these cruel injustices, but develop at a very basic level the future model for the organization, cooperatives. Many of these Black farmers were also Black landowners who wrestled with the additional problem of an ongoing and systematic program by local and national forces to rob Black folks of land that was rightfully theirs. This special combination of people and history came together to create a unique organizing model for that time. Some of the qualities that made what the Federation was doing at that time uncommon were, one, early on, the organizers intersected issues of racial justice and economic justice with a bottom-up approach to organizing. The organizing centered on Black rural America versus major cities. Third, Black women were central to the work and held key leadership roles both in local cooperatives and the emerging regional structure. Fourth, Black farmers were the core membership from the very beginning. Out of this, the mission of the organization became clear: cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy. So we were chartered in 1967. We started out with 22 cooperatives and spread across the South to today we have 75 cooperatives under our umbrella, owned and operated by Black farmers, landowners, residents, and workers. In fact, our regional assets amount to millions, and it's wholly owned by the membership. My executive director likes to say, and I like to repeat that, if for some sad and tragic reason we had to dissolve, our members wouldn't owe anyone. But that's our story so far. There's much more we have to do to more fully realize our vision. Part of this involves supporting other communities, especially Black ones, to develop their own cooperative development plans and strategies. So I'm grateful to be with you today to share some of the ways that we have seen positive outcomes through cooperatives and hear your thoughts and questions about strategies for change. As the saying goes, now more than ever, we need these conversations, don't we? Since this past spring, we've seen the coronavirus pandemic stall key sectors of the global and US economy, thrusting tens of millions of people into and underemployment and sending shockwaves throughout poor and working class communities. In the Black community in particular, where longstanding economic, social, and health disparities were already the norm, the coronavirus has exacerbated the crisis we face. In many ways, this confluence of issues erupted in a re-energized racial justice movement sparked by yet another example of racialized violence by police at the behest of what Bell Hooks calls white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. In fact, we at the Federation argue that Black farmers are on the front lines of impact from the confluence of climate change, COVID-19, economic downturn, and racial disparity. Yet, they are also first responders. Despite the oppressive they're subjected to, they continue to produce food needed by so many communities in this moment of crisis. So these times are pleading to us for solutions to historic problems. But I'm not here to pontificate as a Southern outsider, pretending we have all the answers. In fact, in addition to sharing our ideas, we're here to listen. We also have a real stake in Black farming in Ohio through the Cleveland Seasonal High Tunnel Initiative. As you've heard, this is a project we've been collaborating with the USDA and NRCS on since 2012. It sprang from the visionary leadership of Representative Marsha Fudge and Terry Cosby and Vivian Dixon and so many others. The objective was and remains to provide Black urban farmers in Cleveland and Akron with critical access to programs such as the High Tunnel initiatives and to help Northern agriculturalists extend their growing season. With more than 175 high tunnels constructed, the initiative has succeeded in helping to create true material assets for communities attempting to overcome poverty and food insecurity. We were asked to participate in the initiative because of our special experience in organizing with Black farmers. Moreover, our approach entails working with local Cleveland and Akron residents, some of them from Ridall, as was noted before. And this often meant that the Black urban farmers from those communities were leading the way, providing outreach and technical assistance in navigating city permit policies and the rules of the program. But in addition to reaching the basic deliverables of the project, we also spread the message that cooperative economics can be a power tool to optimize the collective capacity of hoop houses. And people are listening. Just before the coronavirus pandemic struck, I was asked by a local collective of Black hoop house owners to give a talk on building cooperatives. We talked about how to get started on cooperative development, such as defining a co-op. There are many different ideas about what cooperatives are, and we wanted to share our perspective that ultimately a cooperative is a collectively owned business. And we believe that cooperatives' most useful purpose is to generate resources. Some people call it profit, we call it surpluses. Generate these surpluses to improve the livelihoods of not only the individual member of the cooperative, but the community as a whole through redistribution of those resources. We talked about finding a need. From the Federation perspective, great co-ops, long-standing co-ops, strong co-ops start by trying to fulfill a human need they see in their communities. We talked about some of the benefits of cooperatives, such as becoming a business owner. More deeply put, becoming someone, a part of a group that owns the collective means of one's own production, and to create living wage jobs and to lower input costs for business startups. We outlined a 10-point plan for cooperative development and highlighted principles. Some of the key principles that we talked about were democracy, autonomy, and one of my favorite co-op principles, concern for community. We talked about the different types of cooperatives the Federation helps communities create, such as ag producer cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, such as collectively owned or cooperative grocery stores, credit unions, which are financial cooperatives, worker-owned cooperatives, and housing cooperatives. We talked about how one might finance their cooperative, either through equity or debt. After my presentation, this collective realized two things, importantly. One, that cooperatives can be a very important model for not only better utilizing hoop houses, but it can serve as a complete community revitalization strategy. Second, that democracy and equity are central to the cooperative model. Therefore, they had to do more work in the community to get people to the table. And that's what cooperatives are all about, bringing people together for collective and not just individual prosperity. Now, people often ask about success stories, and I have to define or contextualize our successes in two ways. First, in an interpersonal, farmer-based way. Second, in an institutional way. From the farmer-based perspective, our cooperatives have been able to help save Black land by using legal supports and advocacy. We've been able to develop co-ops that have been operating for decades. We've been able to use our cooperative development program to aggregate and market collectively to maintain and even increase farmer incomes. And we've been able to create local jobs with worker-owned cooperatives and producer cooperatives. But I argued that our more influential successes were on an institutional level. First and foremost, we successfully created a 53-year-old organization of scores of cooperatives that have withstood political and financial attacks from local and national entities. We spearheaded the creation of USDA programs that directly benefit farmers of color, women farmers, and veteran farmers, such as the 2501 or the Socially Disadvantaged Farmers and Ranchers Grant. We helped lead the Black farmer lawsuit that took on the issue of Black land grabs and rendered through a settlement, a multi-million-dollar settlement that went back to those Black farmers. And we've won victories in our campaign to democratize rural electrics, in particular in Alabama, where we have a rural electric by the name of Black Warrior. For 80 years, this rural electric that took the resources from Black members, but hardly gave them any political power or patronage. We changed that. The Black Warrior Board now has 2 African-American members, and for the first time in 80 years, the cooperative has paid out patronage to Black residents. These successes notwithstanding, massive challenges remain for us to grapple with. For example, we have identified 2 major barriers to the growth of cooperatives in the South. Number one is structural. We lack enabling legislation in the South that recognizes anything other than agricultural or rural electric cooperatives. This has an impact on the diversification of cooperatives we can develop, but also on their long-term financial health and democracy. We also experience exclusion from various forms of small business administration loans due to the collective ownership structure of our cooperatives. And finally, the National Credit Union Administration's limitations on the size of financial holdings of credit unions limits the grassroots financial institutions we can develop but more importantly, developing sources of financial capitalization for our co-ops. The second barrier is one that I would describe more as cultural or social. And you've heard some of that today, where on one hand, we are faced with this issue of an aging farming population. The average farmer in the Federation is in their late 50s and early 60s. Some are in their 80s and 90s. This is combined with heirs who are thus far disinterested in getting back into agricultural. So this contradiction is creating something of an existential crisis for our future, and it's something we have to handle. Also, at the same time, we see a growing interest, as it was mentioned, by Black farmers, but many of whom are landless. So clearly, these are very big challenges. As I said, they're existential in many ways. And this was before the coronavirus pandemic. When COVID-19 struck earlier this year, we had cooperatives that had lost nearly 70% of their revenue due to closed markets. Our cooperative model has helped these farmers recover to a degree by harnessing and redirecting resources to Black farmers identified through our farmer assessment plan. We identified those who are hardest hit and pinpointed resource efforts. Additionally, our staff from across the region got into motion and provided technical assistance to Black farmers attempting to apply for CARES Act resources. Thirdly, in collaboration with the USDA, we implemented a food box program that met a twofold need. One, we got food out to needy families, and two, we provided new markets for farmers who had lost outlets for their commodities. But that's just how our cooperative model has enabled us to respond to urgent needs. The structural and social barriers that I described are problems that will take a lot more time and a lot more people to address. For that, our strategy is pretty straightforward, albeit protracted, and to a large degree dependent on the unpredictable conditions created by a changing historical context. But simply put, our strategy is to educate people about the need for policy and legislative changes, namely enabling legislation for cooperatives. We want to build coalitions with other cooperatives to aggregate our power. And we want to use our advocacy and organizing tools to influence decision makers. So I think this is a good place to close. But in essence, what I want to leave you with is that the cooperative model can be a powerful instrument to help Black farmers in particular, but also we believe the Black community in general. Cooperatives can help us advance our economic interests in any industry or sphere of society. Cooperative economics has historic roots going back millennia. It has international connections. It is built on values like fairness and sharing, even in the best cases, love. And it provides you and I with a means to organize ourselves. And that's a wonderful thing, and what we need more of in this moment in history. Thanks again to the organizers of the Black Farmers Conference and for the invitation to speak. We at the Federation are grateful to have had this time to discuss such important issues. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your questions.
Thank you so much, Terrence. We really appreciate you being here today. Before we move into the question portion of your presentation, I wanted to take a moment to ask another poll question. So April, could we post the poll question?
The poll is up. I wondered about that.
Okay, so I don't see it.
Okay, that's very odd. It's showing on mine, but you're right. I said launch poll.
I posted it on my end. Can people see the second question? The question reads, is there a topic that you would like more information about that was highlighted this morning? Do individuals see that full
They
question?
can see it now. I see it in the chat that people can see it.
Okay. We'll give you a few more seconds. Okay, so we have 72% that have voted. So we can go ahead and share the results. Oh, did you all see those results? Okay, so it looks like you all were able to review the results. Is that correct? Okay. For some reason, the initial results deleted. So I do apologize for that. We can just move on instead of relaunching the survey. Okay, so we do have a few questions in the chat box for Terrence. So DJ Knox asks, what does the budget or financials look like in a farming cooperative development plan? Are the budget and financials implemented by the collective or by the individuals within the cooperative? And then there's a follow-up question that says, are there any examples that people can glean from? So I guess, do you want me to ask the first part of the question again?
Yes.
What does the budget or financials look like in a farming cooperative development plan? Are the budget and financials implemented by the collective cooperative or by the individuals within the cooperative?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I understand your question. Consider that a cooperative is a collectively owned business. So what decisions that cooperative makes are going to be governed by its board. And those decisions are based on a one member, one vote model. So that's how all financial and budgetary decisions are made. Now, regarding the individual farmer who may be a part of that cooperative, it's really up to that farmer's discretion how their individual farm plan is developed and implemented. However, one of the things we do as a cooperative is to provide technical assistance to individual farmers to personalize their farm plans. But that in essence is how that interaction works.
Thank you. So a question from Jonathan Greer asks, the work of these co-ops sounds phenomenal, although I mainly hear of them in urban areas. Are there any examples of urban and rural co-ops, and how would they benefit from some of the resources available?
Well, most of the rural co-ops that you'll find if you do the research will be agricultural based cooperatives. In addition to that, the reason you may hear so much about cooperatives being located in urban centers, especially those up north, for the reasons I just named. Here in the South, we lack the kind of statutory, regulatory, or legislative policies to proliferate cooperative development. In the South, it differs slightly from state to state, but most states in the South only recognize two kinds of cooperatives. Those are farm, producer, agricultural cooperatives, or rural electrics. Any other kind of cooperative is forced to become a nonprofit or LLC and to create internal bylaws that mimic cooperatives. But that really put limitations on one, the resources these cooperatives can access, their freedom to really engage a market, the long-term viability and sustainability, and more importantly, the long-term democratic principles of cooperative development. So, I guess I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Terrence. I do want to also just mention briefly, if there's anyone in the Dayton area looking for cooperative opportunities, we do have Co-op Dayton that is right here in our community. We also do have Co-op Dayton that is here with us virtually. I can also send in the chat their website. And again, this is an opportunity for the watering hole to really connect with folks that you wouldn't necessarily normally have an opportunity to connect with because we're from all over the United States. I do want to follow up with additional comments that Jonathan Greer made. He said, "What could I do to connect with an urban area close to me to build collaboratively?" So again, this is an opportunity for the watering hole. And if you're in the Dayton area, please reach out to someone at Co-op Dayton. There is a question from Michelle Ajamian. Terrence, are there co-ops growing and processing nuts, beans, and grain crops?
You know, that's an awesome question. I haven't seen the data on, processing facilities, but I do know that is a big need. We at the Federation have a nut processing facility in Alabama, and it's been very useful for us, especially since we produce so many in Georgia, especially since we produce so many pecans in Georgia. We also can use that processing facility to create what we call value-added products, where we may cover the pecans in chocolate and package them in Christmas time. But processing facilities, especially cooperatively owned, are more in need. They're very hard to start up. Getting the resources is always a challenge. Again, that speaks to one of the other problems we have in the South, or really nationally, given that it's become more difficult for us to create our own financial institutions that will loan money to help us start up our cooperatives. And then also I'd like to add, one of the big contradictions we're seeing is there's a growth of interest in the South here in hemp production, but no laws in place to support building processing facilities. So you can grow hemp in certain states, but you can't convert it into anything, much less transport it across state lines. So local processing facilities around any of these commodities would be a big help, I believe, especially in the South.
Thank you so much, Terrence. So there are a few questions and comments asking about resources as well as contact information. I do want to let you all know that we will be sharing resources as well. Contact information will be made available, so you will have an opportunity to obtain Terrence's contact information. And again, the watering hole is an excellent opportunity to network. Another question is from Krista McGaw, and I do apologize if I pronounce your last name wrong. What states have good cooperative enabling legislation? Now, before you answer that question, one of our keynote speakers that will be speaking this afternoon, Rachel Tays of the Ohio Ecological Food and Farming Association, shared with everyone in the chat that OSU has a cooperative development center that's run by someone by the name of Hannah Scott. So that is the state of Ohio resource. But if there are any other states that you can specifically speak to, Terrence, that has a good cooperative model as well as a good cooperative enabling legislation.
Yeah, the states with the best cooperative enabling legislation you're going to find are in the Midwest. In my mind right now, Wisconsin and Minnesota stand out prominently. But I do think Ohio is doing pretty well. One other recent change has come from New York. I'm not sure if it's just local, but they recently passed, maybe it was a city council ordinance that passed legislation to support cooperatives through actually resourcing cooperatives, newly emerging cooperatives. So you'll find the best examples in the North, particularly in the Midwest.
Thank you. Just as a follow-up question to that, based off of your background, can you provide any support or advice around really a grassroots movement for someone who lives outside of Ohio or Minnesota or Wisconsin to actually really work with some of their legislators on trying to get better laws in place for cooperative business models?
Mm-hmm. I hate to sound simplistic, but it is pretty simple from my background. It all really starts with organizing. You really first have to build a base. You have to bring people together, and you have to struggle over an ideological point of view, a set of principles, and a strategy. And you build your own base. You work with other organizations, and you develop a campaign to sometimes pressure elected officials to meet the needs of the people. And I think what's so special about this time, and I think, in many ways you see things opening up, is because, we awaken this idea that, people have to stand up and organize and sometimes demonstrate and make their message known. I think utilizing some elements of that along with a real focus on strategy are really what's going to transform the whole situation.
Thank you so much. So before we get into any more questions, there was a lot of support around relaunching the poll. So let's take an opportunity to relaunch the poll for folks. And then there is an opportunity to continue to ask questions. We have about 10 minutes before we go into the lunch break. So if there's any other questions that you all have for Terrence, please go ahead and do that now. Place them in the chat box.
All right, are we ready to wrap up the poll?
Can you share the results, or do I need to do that?
You know, if you can share them, I, for some reason, do not get to see the results.
Okay. Can people see the results of the poll? Okay, perfect.
Do you want to
So
read them out, Ariella? Can you read them out, or?
Yes, yes. So the question was, is there a topic that you would like more information about that was highlighted this morning? The first breakout session, the first keynote was 40 acres and a mule, and there was 47% interest. Urban farming, there was 45% interest, and cooperative farming, 67% interest. And it looks like there were 66 individuals that answered the survey, the poll question.
Great, thank you.
So thank you, everyone. So we're going to go back into the Q&A. Rachel Tays asks, Terrence, can you share how your organization might help farmers or support organizations here in Ohio?
So I'll take the last part first. The work here in Ohio is a bit tricky. We are chartered to operate and do cooperative development in the South. So in some ways, we have limitations on the work we can do on Ohio. We've thus far have really pretty much limited our efforts in Ohio to, supporting the Cleveland initiative and providing education, Co-op 101 workshops to local Clevelanders and Akronites. Until things change, unless the board amends our charter or some case like that, I think that may be the extent to which, we can do direct support here. However, I do recommend that, there are many great examples locally that could probably be more hands-on. Having said that, we always are willing to provide more education and any other support we can. In fact, in October coming up, October 21st through 23rd, we're going to virtually hold an annual event called Co-op Econ, which is a 3-day deep dive into cooperative development. Since that's going to be virtual this year, many of you probably can register for that and participate. Typically, it takes place at our Rural Training Center in Epps, Alabama. We have a dormitory down there, meeting hall, kitchen, 1,300 acres of farmland, lake, horses, bees. So we bring people down there for kind of a retreat and education, but can't do that this year, so we're going to make it virtual. So that's another opportunity for people interested. And I would say go to our website, federation.coop, to learn more.
Thank you so much. I want everyone to know again that we will be providing the resources that have been mentioned throughout all of the various presentations during the post survey. And if any of you have been registered, we will make sure you get that information. We also encourage you to please check out the resources that are listed in our virtual program booklet. So there is a question from Krista McGaw. I'm sorry, I already asked that question. There's another question that is from Elmarie Brooks, and Elmarie wants to know if there are cooperatives that support goat farming.
Absolutely. It's so eerie that, your questions are really kind of highlighting pieces of our work that's taking place right now. As a matter of fact, we're developing goat cooperatives in Alabama. The latest one is called Sagoco, Southern Goat Cooperative. So they've been raising goats for a couple of years now. They're doing pretty good. The new challenge they're facing is a lack of goat meat processors in Alabama. Our folks often have to drive into Georgia to get that done, which becomes a transport cost. So we're looking for, processing facilities. But yes, I'll put it this way. I mean, and I hope I got this through in my talk, is that a cooperative can be utilized for any business enterprise you can conceive of. It's just a matter of the structure. A cooperative is going to be a collectively owned business where the profits go to all the members equally. There won't be a CEO or small elite group at the top extracting all the money and the resources. So any business idea you have can be used with a cooperative. It's just a matter of coming up with a sound and feasible plan.
Thank you so much. So the final question is from Krista McGaw, and she wants to know, what examples are there of increasing Black farm ownership? And a follow-up question is, what policies are needed? This might actually be a question that can really be discussed more in the watering hole, to really just garner more networking to see what we can do here on a local level. But Terrence, if you do have any advice on some of the examples around increasing Black farm ownership that you may have seen or heard from your counterparts, especially here in Ohio, especially because the network is so strong in the South. And I also want to say that we do have other representatives that are on the call that could really speak to more of that, but this is really a question that we want to pose to Terrence right now, and then there can be further discussion in the watering hole. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Ariella. I would actually defer to, folks. Y'all know the area better than I do. I just in general, though, I think, the crisis in Black land loss remains. We're still losing land, albeit at slower paces. We're also finding, unfortunate examples of, heirs, maybe folks my age, 40s and under, who are just not interested right now in agriculture. And that often leads to the sale of these important lands. So to whatever extent we can develop strategies to save and grow, I think we could use them. I'll defer to the people who live in Ohio about how to go about that.
Okay, are there any committee members that want to speak to that? I know that there is a collaborative effort that is happening. I can think of many different scenarios that are happening around the state, but I really want to give others an opportunity to talk about individual work.
Well, I don't know if you're speaking about me, Ariella, but certainly our committee has talked about ways that we can move the work forward after this session, because we really saw this conference not just as a way to educate ourselves and our communities about where we are, where we've been, but then also to strategize how we move forward. And I was really so inspired by your talk, Terrence, about this really important choice point that we find ourselves in with all the stressors going on, but then also the opportunities that those open up for the rethinking of our food systems. And I think that there's just a lot of people in our area, as around the country and indeed around the planet, who are really recognizing this moment and really looking forward to working together to moving our food systems forward in a way that is equitable and that increases community and individual sovereignty. So thank you, Terrence, and thanks everyone for being here. I think Ariel is right. We're looking forward to working with folks after this to see how we can move ourselves forward.
Can I say one quick word, Ariella? I just want to say that it's impossible for us to develop social justice without incorporating this extremely important issue of food insecurity and the lack of production among Blacks. So I'm real encouraged by everything I heard but very excited. And my group is Black Lives Matter Miami Valley, which is perceived as a urban movement, but we need to move into rural areas and connect these structures. And it's really exciting to hear what you have to say. So I hope people who are working as community advocates will recognize the importance of including our rural areas. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. And thank you, Susan. Before we wrap up, I do just want to also mention that Terry said something earlier about really just making sure that what works in one community may not work for another community. So my work in Cleveland, so Cleveland is a very political city, and I will say I really do believe that the leadership from my former boss, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, and her support on the Agriculture Committee, and really wanting to recognize the need in her community was really a catalyst to where the program, the High Tunnel program is today. So that is one example of Black farming in Cleveland. There are several other examples, but again, I think it is really important for people to understand their communities and the need. Earlier it was mentioned also that we really had to go into the community. And yes, we were working with USDA, the federal government, but we also needed to we had to work with people on the ground in Cleveland and have the Federation come in and support what the local people are really doing to figure out what the needs are and to say, this is really, this is real, and this is how we can support our community. So thank you all. We are going into our break. There was actually there was a large request around us playing the video from Annalisa Cox's remarks from yesterday evening. So we will actually be playing her video remarks during the lunch hour. This is really an opportunity for you to have a break during our conference. So if you choose to step away from your screen, we ask that you do that so you can take some time for yourself. But if you would like to see the remarks, that's a choice. You can also have an opportunity to use the watering hole and communicate with others that you've been speaking with on the chat. And we will see you back in an hour. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ariella. And I'm going to show the video here. I'll get the keynote address started. But I know that Terrence and Terry, if you're still here, or Latricia, if you're there were folks who were in the watering hole after your presentations who are interested in talking with you more about what you said. So if you're interested in hopping over there into the watering hole, I'm sure there would be folks there who would be interested in discussing your topics.
Oh, thank you. I would love to. I think it's my shift for childcare now.
Well, that is very important.
Thank y'all. I appreciate the opportunity. Have a great conference.